Hello, welcome to Using a Source as Support. Why should we use sources anyways? It helps add credibility to your ideas, it helps you prove your ideas, it makes you look a lot more knowledgeable, and it helps take the burden off of you. Nobody really knows everything.
So, we already finished the article, and now we're going to go ahead and move forward. We're actually going to try to use that text to support this idea. So what is the purpose of wisdom teeth? That's what we're going to try to support with the text. So there's different types of support from sources. You can summarize, you can paraphrase, and you can directly quote. Hopefully this is just review because you went over the information earlier in the module. So summary and paraphrase are sort of similar. You're kind of summarizing. It's kind of on a spectrum. One is not like you do one or you don't do one. It's kind of together. Summary is using the main ideas of a passage, but you put it all in your own words, right? It's all in your own words, and it's kind of from memory. You still need to make sure that you provide the source, the name of the author, the page number, if possible, okay? So, you don't always have to have all of those things, but you do need to tell your audience where this is coming from to offer that sort of credibility. So let's go ahead and do some summary practice together. So I opened up a Google document, hopefully you guys have too, and I'm going to go ahead and share this.
Like you want to share this with me, I'm going to share it with myself here, Molina, my other email, but that way you guys know, make them an editor, make me an editor, right, jholt@elcamino.edu. And I titled this Using Sources, and then I'm going to write something like
Summary Practice Together, so that I know that we're doing this together. And I want you to actually practice this along with me, okay? So I'm going to pull up and the thing is we want to think about what's the purpose of wisdom teeth, okay? So we know that our ancient ancestors ate very tough foods. Their diet was full of hard nuts, uncooked vegetables, and so the jaw would grow longer, and often they would grind down or lose their molars. So I'm going to take that idea, and I'm going to write down a summary. And I want you to write this down. I know it's a little bit elementary for you guys to actually copy what I'm saying, but it's really good practice for you guys, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and write this, and I think I would write something like, the purpose of wisdom teeth appears to be to provide extra teeth when our ancestors lost molars to the hard foods that they ate. According to the article, why do wisdom teeth come in so late? Okay. Now, you guys can write that slightly differently if you want, but I kind of want to make sure that we're doing this together, all right? Go ahead and finish up with that. If you need to pause, go ahead and pause and finish.
I'm going to go ahead and move
on. One of the things that you want to make sure that you do is you always check with your text and make sure that you summarized accurately, you didn't plagiarize, and you didn't take any exact words.
So I know that we did not really take any exact words. I didn't look at it. We had kind of looked at it, and I'm pretty sure that we're okay on that particular front.
So next thing is paraphrasing. You take the idea from the text, that's what a paraphrase is, and you put it in your own words, but it's much closer to the language of the text or media.
So we're going to go ahead and paraphrase practice here together, just like we did before. We're going to go ahead and open up our Google Doc again and start to write this. Okay, so I'm back here on my document that I annotated, and I'm looking at the part that talks about ancient humans and what they ate. And we know that their diets were full of hard nuts, uncooked vegetables, and chewy meats. We know that that was the reason why they could not, or they continued to grow another set of molars, right? Because the jaw sometimes needed that, and that the molars would grind down. And we want this because it's a paraphrase. We're going to paraphrase this whole thing right here. We want to make sure that it's a little bit closer in the text, or to the text, okay? So this is kind of our text, but we don't want it to use any exact words. We don't want to use the same words because then it would be considered plagiarism, especially if we didn't cite it and we didn't put in quotation marks. So here is my Google Doc again, and I'm going to go ahead and write paraphrase practice. You guys can do the same. Paraphrase together, because we know we're doing this one together. And I didn't mention this, but I mentioned it on the assignment page that there is a very strong pedagogical theory that talks about the I do, we do, you do, and that's a really good way for students to be able to learn things. So this is sort of the I do, we do, and then you do, okay? So paraphrase practice together. We kind of looked at it. I'm going to think about how would I paraphrase that. The purpose of in so late. The article continues.
Explaining that our caveman ancestors, so I did use the word ancestors, but I kind of threw in the word caveman. We didn't talk about that. I kind of changed this around a little bit, I think. Caveman ancestors consumed, and I'm going to go with like fruits and nuts. They did use nuts, but I think that kind of works, you know, a lot of fruits, nuts, and berries
that they foraged, eating these types of durable
foods, lengthened their jaws, making room for wisdom teeth. Okay. So if you did yours slightly different, that's okay, but that's kind of the idea, and then we would go back and look at the text, right? How close we are and whether or not we sort of plagiarized it. Okay, so off camera, I put that on there. And here is the actual text that I looked at.
Ancient humans ate tough foods. Their diets were full of hard nuts and cooked vegetables, right? And we did not really use any of the exact same words. And so I think that works, right? We didn't plagiarize.
Before I move on to quotes, I just want to take a quick citation break. So for your next paper, for the summary response paper, you're going to actually need to put a works cited page. And I wanted to show you how that works. I got this article from Newsella, which is like a teacher service where
you can take an actual news article and make it easier to read so that it can adapt to students wherever you want it to, right? So one of the things
that you want to do here is you want to put the name of the author, right? The author's last name, their first name, comma, first name, and then any other additional authors, period. And they go actually first name, last name, right? Then the title of the article, the title of the newspaper, right? So if this was like the New York Times or something like that, it would then go in italics. Here it's via Newsella, edited by Newsella staff, so then that would follow the editor. Version, Lexile, right, which is, we actually did a particular Lexile, then the date published, and the URL. And so I did that here, and here's the example. The only thing that's a little bit off here is that right here, this should be indented, but for some reason I had a hard time doing that here on Canva when I was trying to use that. But you kind of get the idea. We're going to work into this. We're going to talk about it a little bit more as we move forward. But you sort of have an idea of what a citation is going to look like for your works cited. So what about if you don't have all those things? I remember asking my professor the same thing, and she said, you just move in from the side and start with what you have, right? So if you don't have an author, then you move to the next part, which is the title of the work. You don't have a title of the work, which would be very rare. You move to the next thing and just continue to go in, right? Another thing that is interesting is that most of the library databases are able to provide you with a MLA citation for MLA 9, and I highly recommend just taking that and using that, okay? So here was the actual works cited for the Newsella that we did. I was able to do a hanging indent on there, and there you go. Okay, so first, before we move on to quotes, I want to tell you, use summary and paraphrase most often. There is nothing worse than a paper that a student just dumped nothing but quotes in, because the paper's not their paper. And as you guys probably have already noticed, I love hearing from you. I like to see what you guys have to say. I mean, it's important for you to respond and join that other larger conversation, but I want to know what you think about it. All right, so what is a quote? Hopefully you guys already know this and went over the material, but quotes are direct, exact words from a text or media. It has to be exact. You cannot change one word. You cannot change a punctuation. You cannot anything without like showing that you changed that, okay? So why should we use quotes anyways when they're so difficult to use, difficult to cite? It really does give you credibility. It does prove your point. It sort of continues that larger conversation, right? You can see this person actually said these words. It shows that you know what others have said. Sometimes it actually creates some kind of humor or sets the tone, and it really does help you build interest.
This is one of the most important questions, is when should I use quotes? And my number one thing is sparingly. I think one of the things students notice when I'm working with them one-on-one is how incredibly small the quote is, usually when I help them formulate it. You do not need this really long quote. You need the most important part. So use them sparingly. Number two, when you must use that exact language, use a quote when it is funny, it is really important, the way it's said, it just can't be said any other way. It's like magical, right? Or you need to analyze that passage, especially if you're working with some kind of text that's like literary or something like that. In general, quotes should be brief, right? Only use a long quote if you are very purposeful. You need to have a reason that you're using it. If you don't know why you're using that quote, if it's just to make your paper longer, then it's not really going to communicate the ideas that you want to. Your audience is going to say, why did this person just throw a big quote in? I could have just read that myself. They want you to really interpret it, right, for them. But how do I use quotes, right? Quotes are very difficult to use. You're going to use them in what is called a quote sandwich. I got permission from the author to actually show this to you guys, but I think this is a really great little, infographic showing how to use quotes, and that top piece, right, is your bread, right? It's the introduction. It's you setting up the quote. The quote is the meat part, right, that meaty part. And then the bottom piece is what helps explain it and tells you why that quote is important. Okay, so it's kind of a two-parter in that last part. You always want to explain the quote, and then you want to say why you're putting that in there, okay? So imagine, I don't know if any of you have ever really tried to cut your carbs and you try to eat only one slice of the bread. Not very easy, right? It's a lot easier when you have those two top parts, right? You can really eat, you can really dig into that quote. The first thing you want to do is you want to use a lead-in phrase. You want to introduce that quote. Quotes cannot just dangle in the middle, right? They cannot be orphans just hanging out there. You have to connect them to a sentence and to that paragraph. It's almost like they need to be rooted, so that's why I put a little plant there. I am here on our assignment sheet, and on there I actually put some lead-in verbs for you. So these are some of the verbs that you might want to use to help you lead in. So you might say the author admits. The author declares, the author observes. And so you can use this to signal the quotes coming, and you can also use them afterwards to explain the quote a little bit, okay? So these are some of the things that you're going to want to use, according to, etc. Now, if you go to the quotes, paraphrasing, summarizing, quoting page, the read and watch page, and you go click on the quotes tab, if you scroll down, you will see that there are some templates for you that are actually created. It says, what X's point here is demonstrates, etc. I also connected you to this page here. I will make sure that I point that out a little bit better, which is like formatting for short quotes, and it shows you how they put it together. Chang emphasized that, right? The weight training for women claimed that engaging in weight-bearing exercises. So do you see how it sets it up? These quotes are not orphans sitting there all by themselves. In Chang's 2008 text, Weight Training for Women, she asserts engaging in weight-bearing exercise, single most important, right? Then there is the health, right, quotation. We don't actually put the page number for MLA, but the idea is the same, and gives you all different kinds of ways that you can put this together. You can keep it as a form of template. So after you have that top part, that bread, right, that lead-in, next comes the quote. So quotes must use quotation marks. You have to put quotation marks around something that is an exact quote, right? You must be exact. You have to use word for word. You cannot change anything. It must be part of a sentence. You cannot just have a quote, even if the quote is a complete sentence. You cannot just put the quotation marks around it and slap it in your paper. It has to be part of a larger sentence, or else it's really functioning as a fragment. You also need to provide a citation. And how you do this is you put the last name of the author and the page number. This is MLA style. This is how we do it for this class. Later on, you may do APA style, which I have done many times before too in my linguistics classes. So just know for this class, this is how we do it. And then you want to put the period after the parentheses. All right, so you may want to kind of note this part of the video and come back. Also, these slides are available to you. If you click on the page, it should still be there for you. Always explain and connect your quotes. Quotes do not ever speak for themselves. A lot of people will say, oh, but it was obvious. It might seem obvious to you, but you don't want the reader or the audience, right, to interpret it their way. You want the audience to interpret it your way. That's why you give them that explanation and connection. An argument's sort of like a game, right? You're trying to get someone to think like you think, and that's why you always want to really explain and connect. So what should you say in that connection and explanation? I remember feeling really insecure about that myself. Some of the things you're going to do is kind of rephrase and explain the quote to your audience, and then you want to tell them very specifically, like as if you're really holding their hand. Tell them how it connects to what you're trying to prove or say. And you're going to see, like, right now how I actually do that. So it's time. Let's go ahead and practice making our quote sandwich. All right, so I am here on the reading page that I annotated, and I'm going to look through and decide, what do I want to use for a quote? What can't be said any other way? So I'm going to kind of look through. I already had created that. And I think one of the most important parts maybe together, cooked vegetables. So we're still trying to look and see what the purpose of wisdom teeth are. So we know that the food is much softer now. And let's see, wisdom teeth are a third set of molars. They're for crushing. That they were meant as a backup. So ancient people would grind down or lose their molars. Let's see.
So I think I'm going to go with this here.
Right, where I said, I didn't actually underline this,
But I like, if you lost your molars or ground them down as a child or teenager, your wisdom teeth are there to fill in the gap. So that seems the real purpose of wisdom teeth. And then I kind of like the way that they say it, like fill in the gap, right? I didn't say that myself in the same way. They talk about children and teenagers. So I'm going to actually use that particular quote. So here, let's go ahead and put it together. So go back to your Google Doc to practice together. You know I'm going to use that quote. So I'm actually going to come through. I'm going to probably copy it. That way I have it, and I can make sure I don't make a mistake. Just in case if you lost your molars, I'm going to make sure I put this in quotation marks. Notice how I use just a very small piece here too. So I'm going to kind of use some of what I set up here and then put it together. Maybe say something like the purpose of wisdom teeth appears to be to provide extra teeth when our ancestors lost molars to the hard foods that they ate, according to the article. Why do wisdom teeth come in so late? Okay. The article, because I always want to contribute it back to the article, the article proposes that, quote, if you lost your molars or ground them down as a child or teenager, your wisdom teeth are there to fill in the gap. Okay, so now we need to make sure we go back and put the author's name in there, because who is the author? Oh, it says just live science.
Okay. So when we don't have an author, then you're going to move to that next thing, which is why do wisdom teeth come in so late? And that's what I would put in the parentheses, but I'm going to not put it in there. I don't need it, considering that I already added it in there. Okay. So let's pretend if I'd had an author, I would write author here. I don't. So we would do it something like that. And now I'm going to go ahead and explain it. Let's say, in other words, let's see, what is it really saying? Just in case our ancestors lost some teeth, they still could eat their hard food with their wisdom molars and continue to survive. And there's my quote right in there, and it's explained and it's also set up so everything flows really nicely. So before we move on, I just want to try a little bit of a bonus here. We're going to try a quote within a quote. This is the perfect article for that because, as you can see, there's lots of people quoted in here, and I want to show you how to do that. So let me go ahead and click on this. It's going to go to a Google Doc, and you can see a quote within a quote. This is available to you also because you have the slides there. Here's from the article, and you can see this is support for what's the purpose of wisdom teeth. And I go down here, I put the same thing that we had before, and I say, The article explains that according to oral surgeon Steve Kupferman, wisdom teeth, okay, and you can see right here, I added this in there because it makes everything flow a little bit more nicely, and we know what I'm trying to talk about. So if you put it in brackets like that, it says, this was not originally in the text this way, but I need it to make everything flow correctly, okay? So I put quotation mark, and then look at this. It's really tricky right here, but kind of fun. There is a quotation mark and then a single quotation mark. So what happens is, in a quote within a quote, you put a quotation mark to show that you're quoting, and then the single quotation mark, the one single quotation, is the quote within that larger quote. And I just keep saying quotes over and over again. But you can see that that's what it looks like. That's because if within your larger quote, you end the quote, you end that with only a single quotation mark. Okay, you finish the quote, and then the double quotation marks go after that. Okay, so you can see that. And here I put, so Stephen Kupferman said, wisdom teeth were meant as a kind of backup for somebody who may have lost another tooth, right? And we put the author if we had it. We don't have it in this particular case. Essentially, this prevented our ancestors from starving because they had no way to chew and process their food, okay? So there's a quote within a quote. It is available to you guys, and you kind of have an idea of how you might want to do that. So now it is your turn. You're going to support the idea that wisdom teeth can cause problems later in life. You're going to actually use a brief summary to do this. So I want you to go ahead and go back to your Google Doc that you had already written things on. Here's my Google Doc. And you are going to write summary practice, and just write that. Or like my summary practice even, that way I know that it's yours. So my summary practice, and you're going to prove not that wisdom teeth are the purpose of wisdom teeth, but instead that they can cause problems later on in life. Okay, so I want you to look through the article, and I want you to figure out how you're going to summarize that from the article and put it there on your paper. And you're going to be on your own to do this, okay? So now that we're back, take a minute to reflect, look at your summary support, and decide, did you cite the source? What do you like about the text, and what do you think that you can improve? All right, let's move on. Now it is your turn again. I want you to support the idea that wisdom teeth can cause problems later in life using a paraphrase. So go back to the text, read through, right, and then kind of don't look at it, and paraphrase the part that you're going to want to use to support that. Then I want you to go back to your Google Doc, right, and write that down. So here is my Google Doc, and I will write this down so you guys can see it. So my summary practice, and then you're going to say my paraphrase practice. Okay, so here's my paraphrase practice, and I'm going to turn that to heading, that way we got it. And you're going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that you've unpaused the video, I want you to take a second to reflect on your paraphrase and think about, did you cite the source correctly? What do you like about what you did? And what types of things do you think you can improve? And now is your turn for the big one. You are going to do a quote. You're going to support the idea that wisdom teeth can cause problems later in life, and you're going to do it with a quote. So be sure that you're labeling each one of these entries so that I know which one you meant to be which one, okay? So go ahead and go back to your Google Doc and put my quote practice. Okay, so put my quote practice right here, and you can go ahead and make that heading so we know that it's bigger, and go ahead and do that now. Pause if you need to. Okay, so now I want you to reflect on your quotes. Look and see if you cited it correctly. Did you use quotation marks correctly? What do you like about the text? What could you improve for the next time? Now comes the big one. I want you to write your very own quote sandwich on your own without any of my help. You can choose any of the readings that you have done recently. If you're reading your own book, you can choose that.
You can do any of the 1619 project. You can do any of the pieces that I have from Twitter. You can cite a TikTok, anything like that, as long as you do your citation correctly. And I want you to actually use a quote, but it is your choice. I need you to make a citation. I would like you to try to do a works cited citation. If you can't, make sure you at least do that internal documentation correctly and provide me a link to whatever it is that you are doing your quote on. Now, if it's something that we did in this class, I don't need a link, but otherwise I will need a link, okay? On the same page that you were already doing for your Google Doc, let me go ahead and show you. Here we go. I actually did a quote. There's an example on the page, and you will say, you know, my quotes. That way it's not practice. We'll just put my quote, and you can stick it directly on there. There is an example of my quote on the assignment page. Okay, and you can see here that I added my quote down here. That's what I want you guys to do. And when you are done, come up here, click this sharing link. Put anyone with the link can can comment. Anyone with the link can comment, or anyone with the link is editor, either one. And make sure you copy that and you paste it in the submission box, all right? Okay, so I know that you guys can do this. This is going to be a lot of fun. And with that, I will see you online. Good job, you guys, enduring through this whole thing.